Okay, guys, I'm going to make a start today. Firstly, welcome. Today we're going to be going through some best practice tips and tricks for Simple Fund 360. My name's Alissa, for those that haven't attended a webinar that I've run before. I joined BGL in September last year after working in a practice setting for 5 years. During that time, I specialised in the SMSF division. I also was heavily involved in our firm's migration from Simple Fund Desktop across to Simple Fund 360. So I will share some, I suppose, insights into the move and how we rolled out the new platform of Simple Fund 360 within our firm and how we got the most out of the software during our process of moving. I also completed my CA just prior to finishing up working at the firm. So I have gone through that process, but after finishing my CA, I decided accounting wasn't for me, but wanted to get through it before I decided to have a bit of a career change. Now, just before we jump into everything, I'm just going to do a thank you. So we do have a couple of our guys from our client success team who are going to be online answering questions. So if you do have any questions throughout today's webinar, please use the Q&A section in your Zoom meeting. The webinar is being recorded and you will receive an email with a link to the recording for today's webinar. So just in case everyone was wondering if they would be able to get it. Okay, so what we're going to cover today, we're going to cover starting with a plan. We're going to go through the entity selection screen, just some features that you may or may not be aware of, the feed management screen, bank data automation, the setup and benefits, smart docs and transaction entry, the distribution tax automation, and also the Workpapers module. So I will stop sharing my screen with the slides and I will switch over to sharing my screen with the software. Okay, so the screen we're looking at now is our entity workflow screen. Now, this is the main screen that you will see when you log into Simple Fund 360. Just going to... Okay, but this is the screen that you will see when you first log into your Simple Fund 360. Now, this lists all your funds and it will have a little bit of an overview. So fund code, name, any labels that you may have used and any unmatched transactions. Now, with the entity workflow screen, can't recommend highly enough the use of the labels. Now, these are free text, so you can create whatever labels that you want. It just means that you're able to filter by the labels that you have created over here on the left-hand side. As an example, the firm that I worked at, we use these labels to separate the funds out between different financial planners. We had one SMSF division, so there was one manager and we had multiple preparers. So managers weren't necessarily top of the list for it, but if you have multiple managers reviewing funds, that's another great label to have. So you could potentially have, manager A, manager B, manager C. It just means that you can filter by those particular managers when you are looking for certain funds. Coming back around to the financial planners, as I mentioned earlier, what we would do at the start of compliance season is we would draft an info request and we were able to filter by each financial planner and just list out the funds that we would need those reports for. So definitely a great tool to utilize when you start to sort of build up the number of funds that you've got on your subscription and just make it easier to filter through. The other tables and graphs you've got here that can be brilliant for using are, in particular, when it comes to tax planning time, the contribution caps and pension funds and pension statuses. So you can see these tables over here on the left-hand side. Contribution cap, contribution cap, you can see here that it just highlights how many entities are below the cap. Same with the NCC cap. So below cap, at the limit, they're over the total super balance, over the age limit. Further on, the pension funds, so whether you have any pension funds or not, whether they're accumulation only funds, this just gives you a great snapshot. So if you were to click on the pension funds, what it's going to do is it's going to apply that filter to your list of funds for you. So it means that you're going to be able to have visibility over whether the minimum pension's been met, or whether you possibly need to touch base with your client before 30 June approaches to ensure that they're meeting their requirements. Now, in terms of the move to Simple Fund 360, if you are looking at moving across from desktop to 360 is obviously a different process to a potential competitor into 360. With the desktop to 360 process, I definitely recommend having a plan in place. It is a new product, it is a new software. So for all the accountants that are used to using Simple Fund Desktop as an example, moving across to Simple Fund 360 is going to be a process. So you will need to learn how to do everything that you obviously have come to be whizzes and pros at in Simple Fund Desktop. So be mindful that it is a process and that you should have a plan. The migration from desktop across to 360 can be done in stages. So if you wanted to identify 5-10 funds with a variety of investments in them and look at moving those ones first, it's a great way to get your head around how to process different elements in Simple Fund 360 before you move everything across. That said, if you wanted to move everything across, we do have very comprehensive training material. We have our client success team, which assists and helps with the migration process. And we also have the learning channel as well. Now, with the training part of, I suppose, Simple Fund 360, the firm that I worked at, we had a, 360 champion. That person was the person that was, I suppose, responsible for learning how to do all the new things that we needed to know how to do in the software. Rather than every single person in the firm attending the paid training, we would have one champion that learnt how to do all that would then share that information with the rest of the team as and when they needed to know that. So that's another option that you have. I will jump into now the feed management screen. Okay. So we've got our feed management screen here now. Now on the feed management screen, I'll just run through the different views, what you can see on this screen, what to be mindful of on this screen. So the first thing that you will notice is that we are in the entity summary. So this is just going to cover one entity at a time, and it's going to show you the three, I suppose, different automation options that you have for automated feeds within the software. So those are bank feeds, the share data feeds, and then you have also your wraps and platforms. Now, for everyone that's on the Simple Fund 360 platform already, you will know that the bank feeds and the share data packs are add-ons. Bank feeds are one feed per, or one bank data pack per fund. So irrespective of the number of bank accounts, you would be looking at having one bank data pack. So whether that's got, you've got 7 bank accounts, you've got 1 bank account, it's the one price. The share data packs, again, is a paid add-on. Again, with the share data though, there are 2 elements to it. You can switch on both, you can switch on one. It doesn't matter which way you want it to go, but there are 2 elements to it, which we'll go through in a little bit of time. The wraps and platforms are free of charge. However, I can't recommend highly enough that this is definitely something where I say start with a plan. This is something that you plan for. So with the first feed that we'll go through is the bank feed. Now, if you come up here and we switch across to the bank feeds global, what this is going to do is it's going to give us a view of all the bank accounts across all our funds that we are looking after, not just the fund that we are currently in or have selected. So with the bank data, would recommend making sure that you have your BSB and account numbers in for your bank accounts that you have for the funds that you're looking after, as this will just keep it up to date and you can keep an eye on whether the account type is supported, what the status is, whether it's a support. So as an example, filtering over here, a supported bank account, whether it's awaiting signature, not supported, but having that BSB and account number is the best way for you to be able to keep an eye on the status of that particular account and when it's going to become available. Now, with the bank data, in terms of generating the bank data forms, if we come through over here, it's just a matter of coming into the setup screen and printing the form. The form will then need to be provided to the client to sign or follow the instructions to set up. Once the form has been signed and returned to you, we can then come through and we can just upload. Give me 1 second. Once we've received the signed form, we can just come in here and upload the signed authority form. So this is a tab here. This status will automatically change once you've generated the form to awaiting signature. So you'll be able to access this option here to upload the signed authority form. Now, from experience, the first, I suppose, automation project that we looked at rolling out in the firm I worked at when we switched across to 360 was this bank feed project. We found that the clients were a lot more receptive, and I suppose we had a lot more buy-in with this client signing forms and getting them back to us when we included the forms with other documents that also needed to be signed rather than them being sent in a standalone email. Clients just seemed to be a lot more, I suppose, interested. They'd talk about it. It wasn't that we were trying to hide the form that we were getting them to sign, but they definitely were more inclined to have, they already had pens out, happier to sign the form, would ask a couple of questions, sort of what was it, how was it going to change the way that we processed, and what it was actually giving us access to. But definitely a good conversation starter, as well as obviously getting the client cooperating and getting us the form back so that we could get these bank feeds underway. Just be mindful with the bank feeds that they are activated from the date that the bank receives the authority form, with the exception of the Macquarie accounts. So you will have a period of time that you are missing data from, which we'll also touch on a little bit later about how you can get that data in if you don't have the bank feed set up from the 1st of July, which generally isn't what happens anyway. Now, if I jump across to the share data, as I mentioned, there are 2 elements to a share data pack. So the first one is the BGL contract notes. Now, these contract notes are the buy and sell documents that are generated when a buy or sale of shares occurs. So the contract notes, when you have this activated, will feed into the software. So you would have access to that contract note, which also then means once the transactions are there, that contract note is going to attach to the transaction and it will allocate the transaction accordingly for you. The second part to this is the BGL registry data. Now, the registry data is going to communicate with Computershare, Link Market and Boardroom, and what it does is it will give you the balance as per Simple Fund 360 and then the balance as per the relevant registry data. The report that it will generate will also show whether there's a variance and which registry data it has been checked against. Now, from an audit perspective, your auditor might still ask for you to provide a HIN or an SRN for them to do a random spot check. Some auditors, however, might just be confident or comfortable with the registry data report that is generated to confirm your holding balances. Now, the wraps and platforms, as I mentioned before, definitely look at having a plan when you're going to roll out your automation. The firm I worked at, we did bank feeds first. Share data, we just sort of identified clients that it was suitable for. The ones that had financial planners that had the wraps and platforms available to us, we looked at working with one planner at a time. So as an example, the first provider that we looked at working with was NetWealth. We just had a really great relationship with them, and they were happy and able to help from their end of it with activating it and providing the details that we needed to put on to our side and switching everything on. I would definitely recommend, though, working with one provider at a time, just because every provider has a separate set of instructions for how to set it up. and you don't want to overwhelm yourself with the process and where everything's at. So definitely look at having a plan and setting up one element at a time. If I come back to the plan that I'm talking about, the bank feeds, as I mentioned before, rolling it out in, if you pick a time, so as an example, if you were to look at having a bank feed project in place for the 2021 compliance season, when you're finalising those funds and sending them out, look at including the bank feeds. Obviously, as I said, you're going to be missing parts of the data, so you won't see the full effect of it until the 2023 financial year, where you'll have the full year of transaction data. 2022, you're obviously going to be missing an element or part of a period of data for that. Now, with the bank feed, once I go through and I show you some different ways of getting data in, people quite often ask, what's the benefit of having bank feeds? Now, I suppose biggest thing with having a bank feed in place is you are able to see live information. So the biggest change for the firm that I worked at with having the bank feeds in place was we went from having, I suppose, to do an info request at the start of a compliance job to ask for the bank statements, which we'd have to wait for them to come in, for us to be able to get the transactions into the software, to then have queries about income that's come into the fund, payments that have been made out of the fund. Whereas with the bank feeds, we obviously had that visibility for the full financial year prior to even starting the info request. So instead of having, I suppose, 2 points of contact with the client to get information to get the job underway, we were able to cover it all in one. So we would still ask them for the bank statements just to confirm bank balances for audit purposes. However, we were also able to include items such as, please provide relevant documents for payment made on, the 7th of July for, $350 or whatever the amount might have been, whether there was purchases or any sort of share trades that we needed to know about. It's also a great way to keep an eye on if a client had potentially spoken to you about wanting to do something investment wise, and then they've gone off and done it. You're able to see, hey, they've obviously gone and withdrawn a huge amount of money and invested it with a planner or with a broker or whatever it might be. We're going to need to get documents for those. Also giving you ample time to potentially look at changing your fee quotes before getting well underway with the job. Okay. Now, what I will go into next is, as I mentioned before, there are periods of time where you would not have the data in. So I'm just going to go through a couple of different ways to get your data into the software if you were, for example, missing a period. So from this transaction list screen, we come down to the bank statement section. It's going to give me the option of my 2 different bank accounts. Now, because I've selected bank statement or bank journal, it's only going to give me the option for the bank accounts here. And then obviously the other side is a free side, and I can select any of the accounts that I'd like to select. What I can recommend with these is if you have a fund that has sort of a repetitive transaction. So as an example, if you've got a fund that receives nothing but interest payments for the 12 months of the year, and then they might receive a large distribution that needs to be journaled in at 30 June. A great way to get those transactions in is to use this feature here and to just be typing in. So if we type in interest, super savings. Now, if I just made this here $10, what I'm going to do though is I'm going to hit post and copy. What this does, and you will notice, is it's posted the first journal that I've done, so for that $10, but it's kept everything else the same. So when you are posting repetitive journals, and this can be particularly handy if you've got a loan statement that you need to manually enter, this post and copy button just reduces the number of clicks you have, because you don't need to then go back into the transaction list, select bank statement again, select which bank account, all the stuff's saved. The only thing you would need to look at changing is the date. So that's one way to get your data in. Now, another way for you to be getting your data in is the smart matching page. Now, what will happen on the smart matching page is you will have the option of your 2 bank accounts that you have. Now, you can obviously import a CSV file from this page here, which is not an issue at all. Other option you've got is the data entry import bank statements. Now, if you wanted to manually enter in your bank statement, you're absolutely welcome to. The fastest way to do that is via this data entry spreadsheet. So you would basically just go through, type in your dates, enter your amounts and generation. Now, this is you're just entering the bank side of the statement. You're not entering anything else. Other option that you have using this data entry spreadsheet is to, if you have access to the client's bank statements, so they provide you the statements via PDF, just go through and you're going to upload the document. And once you hit confirm, it's going to read that bank statement for you. So what this has done now is it's actually gone through, it's picked the dates from the bank statement, the amounts and the narrations. And if I was to click anywhere in here, you can see where it's picking them up from. Alternatively, if I wanted to click on the statement, it's going to highlight across on the graph where I picked up the data from. If you had bank statements, not always lovely and finish on the correct date. If you had bank statements that went out of the date range that you're currently processing, you can either manually go through and hit delete and clear them out. Alternatively, if you just click on clear invalid entries, that was highlighted by the exclamation mark, those will be gone. And it will just be the transactions that have occurred within the financial year that you're currently processing. Now, important to note when you are using the data entry spreadsheet and you use the PDF feature, check the opening balance of the bank account and also check the closing balance before you hit create. You just want to make sure it's picked up all the transactions before you're posting the journals. I'm going to ignore it this time. I'm just going to post them for you. But what happens when you do this? You'll see all our transactions are here. Now, in the smart matching screen, you do have the ability to multiple match transactions. So if I was to come through here, there's already the smart matching machine learning is already starting to understand what I want to do because I've actually got transactions in this fund already, but it's looking at it and it's gone, the Westpac super account, and this is, it's allocating it to the correct interest account for that bank account. Now, in terms of multiple matching, these are all the same transaction. If I was to click here and click on multiple match, they've all been cleared out for me. So I've matched all my transactions in a couple of clicks. Now, so this is a great way, as I mentioned before, with the bank data. If you don't have bank data set up, this is a great way to get your data in. If you've set up bank data, however, and you are missing a period, so say, for example, we were missing from the 1st of July until today's date, using that smart docs to get the bank statement in, obviously a very, very fast way to get that data in for you. Okay, see how I'm going with questions. Looks like the guys are under control with their questions. Next bit I'm going to touch on is the distribution tax automation. So for the firms, I suppose, that have funds that are receiving your 23800 distribution payments throughout the financial year, just wanted to highlight and draw your attention to the distribution tax automation screen. Now, if I switch across, I'm just going to change funds quickly. Now, okay. Now, from this distribution tax automation screen, you would be aware or familiar with securities receiving multiple distributions throughout the financial year. Now, it's important at the end of the financial year to make sure that you're allocating the components correctly. Now, you do have the option of going through and allocating them line by line for every distribution that's been received throughout the financial year. Alternatively, by using this screen, what you get to do is you get to see the total payment that's been received. You can expand this out to see the dates and the amounts that have been received. This is a very exciting example because they're all on the 30th of June. However, if you had a September, December, March, and then June distribution, you should be able to see that all three are there. And most importantly, if you needed to journal in a distribution receivable as at 30 June, you'd also be able to make sure that's there. Now, a couple of things to note on this distribution tax automation screen. The first is the lightning bolt. Now, the lightning bolt indicates that the BGL has system tax data for that particular security. So this is why the setup of the securities using the security codes is really important. What happens is throughout the financial year, so you can see here that this is for the 2021 financial year. If you are coming across securities that don't have system data, feel free to email the annual tax statement for that particular security through to the email address that you find on this page. And what that allows BGL to do is to put the data in at the back end so that it can feed into your software. The other thing that will happen is that if you have particular securities and your chart of accounts set up very cleanly, and these particular securities are linked to multiple funds that you're looking after, it will be a matter of processing the data once and reviewing the data in your next fund, because the data will already be in there and it will be recognizing across your global fund chart of accounts. So with the lightning bolt, if I was to click on here and come up to here and click on generate tax data, what it's going to do is it's going to pick for every unit that I have, for every dollar that was distributed, these are the components that need to be allocated through. Now, this is a demo environment, so the numbers never line up. It obviously works a lot better in a real environment. But this basically allows you to input all your components. You can override these as well. So if you're not happy with what the system has generated, more than welcome to go through and override them. Once it's all done, the variance amount at the bottom here should be 0. As I said before, this is a demo environment. The units are out of whack, the amounts are out of whack, and I'm pretty sure this is a fund sitting in 2018. But once it's all matching and the variance amount has disappeared, you click on generate and mark as reviewed, and that particular security will move out of the incomplete side into the reviewed side. If the particular security doesn't have system data, you can still use this page. You just come through and add custom data. So once again, you are able to check to see the number of payments that have been received throughout the year. It will give you a summary. It will show the amount, and you would come through and add in all your different components. So you just go through this page here, all the different sections. Another thing that's worth noting, and I know it was a big adjustment for when I first moved from desktop across to 360, Simple Fund 360 is very obviously for simple fund management, so SMSF management. The software is incredibly smart and it is aware that it's a super fund and super funds are entitled to the 1/3 discount. This toggle here that switches between 50% and the 1/3 is purely to be used for the report that you have sitting in front of you. Most commonly, the annual tax statements, when they're issued, are issued as an individual, even though it's addressed to a super fund. Now, this toggle here has no relevance to how it's calculated. It's purely for you to be able to enter in the data as it sits on the report that you are looking at. So the annual tax statement that you are looking at. So that's all that toggle there does. If you click it onto 50%, it's not going to calculate the capital gains as though you're putting in the information for an individual. This is purely just so that you can match it to what you are looking at. So I thought that was worth mentioning. Obviously also got the ability to do your AMIT adjustments as well. Now you can attach documents in here, and then once that's all done, generating and marking as reviewed, and it's going to move across into that reviewed section. Checking the questions. So I've got a question here about the unpaid June distribution. Now, if you are using bank feeds, you have to keep in mind that the June distribution is not going to hit the bank account until the following financial year, so therefore won't automatically be journaled in. If you are using wrap feeds, in my experience, some wrap providers that brought the distribution in automatically, others it still needed to be journaled in and then cleared from the transaction that occurred in July usually, or August the following year, to clear out that distribution receivable. But I would definitely be making sure that this payment received amount matches to your annual tax statement before you allocate all those components. So there might be a manual process to add in your distribution receivable as at 30 June. So we've got that one. Just reading through the questions. So good, look like they're all being taken care of. Okay, now the next bit that I'm going to jump in and touch on quickly is the new report screen, just to highlight that there is obviously a new report screen. Now, a new feature that's really recently been added. When you hover over anything on the left-hand side, as most of you will know, you have your menu options that pop out. Now, these menu options are obviously all available across the top underneath your blue bar across here as well. However, probably the most frequently used pop-out sidebar is this quick access reports. You now have the ability to customize which reports you would like to have sitting in this quick access reports list. So as an example, I've changed the trial balance to a detailed trial balance. You can also, if you, as an example, prefer to use the investment income, or you prefer to use the breakup, so the distribution reconciliation report, dividend reconciliation report, you might not necessarily need to quickly generate the notes to the financial statements. By all means, you can now customize which reports show up here just for easier access. So in order to do that, if I wanted to get rid of the notes to the financial statements, and instead I'm going to add, as I mentioned before, the distribution reconciliation report, I'm going to add the star to that report. I'm going to come down here and we can see that that's now sitting in my reports, and I'm just going to refresh this page. And it's also now sitting here as a quick access report too. So just sort of wanted to point that out. The other thing with the new reports page is that you do have the option of having obviously all your reports visible, sorting by A to Z. If you wanted to check to see if there are any new reports that have come in, you can filter it by new reports. You can also have the option of adding tags. So as an example, if you had particular pension documents that you needed to generate every time you started a pension and you didn't want to create a pack for those, you can add those tags to this now. With those custom, with a custom report templates, a quick access reports, it will just be as on a user level. So each user can have their own reports that they go-to reports that they like to use. If you wanted to have reports that were available to everyone as a quicker level, my recommendation would be to create a report pack. So again, firm I worked at used to have different reports for different sort of types of funds. So we used to have an investment pack that would have the investment summary, interest reconciliation report, dividend reconciliation report, distribution reconciliation report, which would be generated and checked off before create entries and the work papers were put together, just to save having to go backwards and forwards with creating work papers and having to replace pages and change things over, which I'll get to when I talked about the work papers. But these client pack report packs here, they are very, very simple to create. I'm just going to clear these tags out here and we've got all our reports. If I wanted to create a report pack, I'm just going to go through front cover, investment, add the investment summary. I'm going to add interest rec, dividend rec, and the distribution reconciliation. And then I just want to create a new report pack, and I'm going to save it as an invest and save. Now, this report pack is going to be available to everyone that has access to the funds, and everyone has access to the funds in the different badges. Okay, now I'm just going to jump into the Workpapers module. I'm just going to change back to my other fund. Jump into the Workpapers module quickly. Now, depending on how your firm is processing Workpapers, whether you've got external auditors, you're inviting auditors into the software. Firm I worked at, we used to do internal Workpapers that went between a preparer and then a reviewer. Once the reviewer was happy with the Workpapers, it was a PDF file which was uploaded to audit along with an Excel version of the trial balance. Now, previously or prior to my departure, we were preparing the Workpapers as a PDF file, which worked really, really well, except for when you had to make changes to the PDF work file because there needed to be a change done in the accounts. That was part where we found it was very, very time consuming and very, very fiddly to make those changes and to redo the Workpapers. So prior to me leaving, we rolled out the use of the Simple Fund 360 Workpapers. Works very much the same way as the PDF Workpapers. Also, if you're using paper Workpapers, same kind of a process. So you've obviously got your account codes down the left, your current year balances, and the statuses of the accounts. So as an example, if I was looking at my fund for the year, now these balances will automatically update and refresh if you make any changes to your accounts. This is something that's worth noting. Obviously, if you've got a PDF file, it's out of the system. It's not going to update automatically. Same with if you're using a paper Workpaper file. Now, if I jump into this dividend received account here, you can see that it gives us a breakup. So we've got our heading account, dividends received, each of the individual dividends. I've added notes to this particular one here, which I'm able to see. This is just as an example, if you were having to do rework between a preparer and a reviewer, I've just identified that there's a statement missing for this particular one. Now, if I come down, what happens with the Workpapers is the system has a standard template. The standard template will include the dividend reconciliation report the same way that the distributions would include the distribution reconciliation report. Same again with interest. Now, underneath that, you're able to upload your supporting documents. So dividend statements, annual tax statements, financial planner report, whatever your document might be. You can also go through and make sure that you've got all your checklists checked off. I think someone's been playing around with this one and added a funny note, but Rocco is not a checklist item. Now, with the notes here, I can come through and reply. Mark is completed because I've now added that particular statement. And reply. So that now is completed. The notes will still be sitting here. You can keep a record of it. And now if I come here and say the rework is done, and now it is back to ready for review. So it will be marked off as green. Now, the other great thing with this particular Workpapers feature, as I mentioned earlier, if you have auditors that ask you to provide them with the Workpapers file, they want a copy of the Workpapers file rather than being invited into the software, all you need to do to be able to give them that copy of the Workpapers file is at the end of your Workpapers, when it's all nice and green and it's ready to go, is you come to this export Workpapers. For the sake of this demonstration today. I'm just going to export the one account for now, just so that I can show you what it looks like with stuff, with actual documents in there. So I'm going to click on export selected. And you'll see what it generates for us. So now, firstly, these are all pre-bookmarked for you. So your cover page, your lead schedule, which is again, sort of a live trial balance for you. Obviously, if you've exported this out at the end of your compliance job, you're not going to have a live one anymore, but it's already been signed off by the reviewer. So it's all ready to go. Now the lead schedule is just going to show you the dividends in total. If I come down now to the dividend received account, it's going to bring up that dividend received schedule for the entire year with a breakup of all our different dividend amounts. Also going to show us what supporting documents the auditor can expect to see. Also the checklist items and that everything's been ticked off, and any notes that have gone back and forth during the review process. Now, if I come over here, I can jump to the dividend reconciliation report, which is going to give me the breakup of those amounts. So each individual payment date, the amounts, the components that are there. And then I come down to these share documents and I can see that I've got the individual payment amounts, and I can go further into checking those with the dividend statements that have been attached. So it makes it a very, very neat little parcel for the auditor to review. Also, if you wanted to, I suppose, review it off the software yourself within the firm, again, it's a very, very neat way of being able to review the accounts and the financials, making sure everything's right, ready to go. The only thing I will mention with the work papers at this stage is if you were to receive a financial planners report that came with a, portfolio, your income for the year, your transactions, so your buys and sales for the year, there is no feature currently to be able to link one document into multiple accounts. So as an example, you'd be linking the portfolio to 776, you'd be linking the income to 239, you might have fees, advisor fees that would be linked in down here somewhere. So there's no way currently to link that one document into multiple different places. What I would recommend, however, is extracting the pages out of that document into their separate sections, which is what we used to do. So we would have the portfolio as one separate report, the income as a separate report, the fees as a separate report, and the transactions as a separate report. And we'd upload them to the relevant accounts just to stop that when you extracted it out, you didn't have a potentially 70-page document uploaded 4 or 5 times, making the work papers hundreds of pages. Just made it a neater file. Okay, looks like the guys are handling the questions pretty well. The last thing I'll touch on is the new fund dashboard screen. I'm just going to make it a little bit smaller. I hope everyone can still see and it's okay. Now, this fund dashboard screen has had a bit of a refresh in recent times. This is just when you come into your funds, obviously giving you a snapshot of your fund status, where everything's at. With the fund snapshot, you can see here that we've got no unmatched transactions. Now, keep in mind with the transactions, it would potentially say if you have bank feeds, even if I'm in the 2020 financial year and I've matched all my transactions, if I have bank feeds operating and I haven't touched 2021 yet, it will come through and say that there's unmatched transactions. Now, they aren't for the 2020 financial year, they're just for the future because I actually have the feeds in place. Now, the work papers was the module I just showed you. You can see here that 12 are still currently sitting as ready as to do. 3 of the work papers are ready for review. Now, the data feeds is just giving you a snapshot over what feeds have been set up. Client query is an internal feature in the software where you can actually query the client in the software without having to manually type out an email. This note section, you guys can see here, the notes have come through from my work papers. The other option that you do have is you can actually add a note directly to this notes page. So this notes section here Really, really great to use if you have multiple people working on funds from a workflow status. If you've got a manager that wants to know what's going on with the fund, why hasn't it been touched, you can add a note here to say, you know, info request sent on 14th of July 2021, waiting on client. That's now saved and sitting there so that the manager or whoever's jumping in can look at that. Same way if you're waiting for the client to come back to you with something, if you're waiting on the auditor, because the fund's currently with the auditor, you can add all these notes into the software so that it's able to keep track of it. If I come down to have a look at the investment dashboard, now be mindful with the investment dashboard that if you have listed securities, they are going to revalue and give you the value as of the previous date. However, the bank accounts, if you don't have feeds, are going to be from the last time the data was entered. So just keep in mind that those two different amounts. If you have bank feeds, obviously the bank feeds are going to be flowing through and you'll have up-to-date bank account information. We'll give you the performance snapshot just over the last 30 days. So any changes in value and the best and worst performing funds. The relationships within the fund and the members. Now, important to make sure you have phone and email addresses in here if you are planning on using digital signing. Digital signing is obviously going to be sent via email. You can also send reminders from with this, and you just want to make sure you've got your details in here so that the correct member can be contacted. Your member dashboard, so it's just showing you a breakup of the member balances, and down the bottom your data feeds and your connections. So if you have an auditor that's been invited into the software. Okay, that brings me to the end of today's session. I'm just going to keep an eye on the questions and see if we've got any questions that are coming through. I've got a question from Helen about splitting the document to attach to the various codes. Basically, we had the portfolio would come through and then we would just extract, you know, page 1 through to 3 and save as, you know, portfolio. And then that got attached to 77600, 74700, 782, I think, which is units. And that's how we would go through and attach it. But we just do a bulk extract out of the documents and attach the relevant one. So save them as the correct code. So if it was the dividend income as an example, save the dividend income and yeah, so on and so forth. So interest, whatever, we would add them all in like that. But yeah, it was pretty quick to extract them out because we would always, when we got the financial planners report, we'd always internally bookmark it anyway so we could jump through them when we were used to using them as one big PDF file. It just became a disaster to use the PDF files if there was any changes to go backwards and forwards. Now the work papers are available to everyone that has access to Simple Fund 360. It's not an add-on, it's not a paid add-on, they are free of charge. So just to quickly highlight, so if you come down to reports, they sit under the reports tab. So the work papers are just sitting in here under the reports tab. Another great thing with the work papers is you can have, it's great, but also something to be mindful of, is you can have multiple years open at once. So as an example, if you've got a client that is great at sending through documents as and when transactions happen, say for example, we're currently in the 2022 financial year. If they're in the process of purchasing a property now, and they're already sending you through the contract of sale and the settlement statements and everything else, you're actually able to create work papers for the next year. So in here, I've actually got the 2021 financial year open as well. And I can be coming into here and uploading documents or saving documents so that they're ready to go. So just a great thing to, I suppose, be able to capture your documents and keep them all so they're ready to go. Also means that when you go to do your info request at the start of the next financial year, you're not going to ask the client for documents because you know that you've already got them. just be careful when you're doing it that you're making sure you're processing the correct financial year. So check this bit up the top and this bit over here to make sure you're in the correct financial year. There's a question about, instead of breaking up the financial planner report into different sections, is there a way to add comments? Absolutely. If you wanted to add comments, the only thing with that I would say is that you're going to have to pick where you want to upload the report to. So as an example, are you going to upload the report to the asset section? In which case you'd come down to the notes. Now the note can be a note that comes through for the reviewer so that you can see it. And we're going to have, whether it's relevant for all the account codes, but you could have, please refer to financial planners report here. And then exactly the same as you've done it here, you would come up to 239 and say, please refer to financial planner report uploaded under 776. So that is another way that you can potentially do it too. There is no charge for Workpapers. I think I mentioned it a little bit earlier. Cody's about to answer as well for you, but no charge for the Workpapers module. So it's available in the software for you all now. If you upload, I've just seen a question here. Do you upload the documents to the Documents tab or the Workpapers tab? Now you have the option to do either. So throughout the financial year, that's where you're used to uploading your documents. When you come into here, and if I wanted to attach a document, these here are my documents that are up in my documents section. So I can search for those documents that are already available, or I can click in here to add a new document. So you have the option of doing both. So it's just a matter of which practice you're in the habit of actually going through currently. Yep, so with the permanent documents, whatever gets uploaded into this permanent documents thing will roll forward from year on year. So if you haven't done it for the first year, but you attach a document in the next year, it will continue to roll forward for you. That one's done. Okay, everyone. I am going to leave it open for a couple more minutes in case there's any more questions. However, thank you very much for attending today. If you do have any further questions, please don't hesitate to either have a look at the help section. So obviously the question mark here, very, very comprehensive help articles. Also got the live chat feature. So that is manned by our support team for your support queries. Also the option to log a support call. And lastly, we've also got our learning channel. So the learning channel is a complete, I suppose, series of lessons of how you do absolutely everything in Simple Fund 360. And I suppose lastly, if you do get super stuck and you can't find what you're looking for, feel free to reach out to your account manager and they can definitely put you in touch with the right person.